I've been dissecting a lot of comics lately, and when reading this one, Wolverine and the X-Men #1 from 2011, I fell in love with the artwork. It was drawn by Chris Bachalo. I've been a fan of his work for years. Some of the first comics I ever read were drawn by Chris. But this comic stood out, and when I hit the last page, I figured out why. Bachalo not only penciled this comic, but he colored it as well. So this is incredibly rare in mainstream superhero comics. Usually one person writes, one person pencils, one person inks, and a fourth person colors. If any one of those pieces are off, it can have a massive effect on the quality of the overall work. And when all the members of that team are totally in sync, it is like magic. And so by controlling the original artwork as well as the finished color, it allows a level of clarity and storytelling that would be much harder to pull off otherwise. Just by flipping through the comic, this is pretty subtle, so let's take a closer look and start to pick this apart. In many comics, really detailed illustrations can be overly detailed and make it really hard for the reader to focus in. What happens then is the art is becoming a distraction instead of an integral part of the story that it's telling. This is the end of the first scene in Wolverine and the X-Men #1. There's a pattern here. It ends in a long shot. This lets him flood the panel with light purple fading to white. Then, when the scene changes on the next page, he can flood that next panel, including the rest of the page, with the color brown. Transitions like this make it crystal clear there has been a scene change without the need of extra text or boxes to clarify there has been a shift. And taking a look at the last panel of that scene, this isn't an obvious color choice. It definitely works, but another colorist may have taken a little bit more liberty with the amount of color that was used here, just to spice it up a little bit. And that wouldn't have been wrong, but it would have lessened the impact of this scene change. And throughout the book, the color change is consistently played down to draw focus to where it belongs in the story. Another thing that happens a lot is a foreground element is colored in as a block color or a solid color. This is an interesting choice because what it ends up doing is it makes that panel less busy and makes that panel flow better within the context of the page. That way this one panel doesn't become the comic book equivalent of a guitar solo. Monochromatic backgrounds are a theme throughout this book. Sometimes to set one setting before changing that setting like we saw earlier, sometimes allowing him to pack more detail and nuance into the background without the background becoming too busy or becoming the focus of any given panel. And even when he does color in his background, he tends to wash them out and wash them into lighter colors and into more purples. To show a counterbalance to this example, here are some pages from Doctor Strange #12, which was drawn by Bachalo but colored by somebody else. The color here is well done, really well done in fact, but it doesn't quite have the same level of intention. I wouldn't be surprised if the artist actually passed along notes to the colorist before this was colored because overall it feels like Chris's coloring scheme. Still, there are pages where there's a lot going on and the color isn't helping define the focus as much as it could be and is giving a lot of different elements, a lot of detail, and a lot of attention. As a side note, I would say that the letterer on this book did a great job creating a word bubble flow on this page, but that's another video. Back to Wolverine and the X-Men, we're moving around this book a lot. It is issue #1, and what happens at the beginning of any story arc is this writer is trying to reintroduce a lot of the ongoing plot lines that they intend to weave together over the course of the next several issues. The story device used to do this is a site inspection of the X-Men's new school. The inspectors are being walked through the school, and at each stop, we, the reader, can peek into some of the different characters and what they're doing and what their role is in this school. This idea and the plot works really well as an introductory story. And the color choices used throughout enhance it and take that story to the next level. So this is my favorite page. In the first panel, we are on the tour. The background is bright yellow, and then we cut to a group of X-Men. The area is bathed in blue. It's a dramatic cut to a whole new room in the school. It would be very easy to lose the reader at this point, but the use of the yellow really grounds us. We know that we're still on the tour, we're just looking at it from a different angle because in the background we see those yellow windows. That yellow is so strong and so prominent that it ties that first panel to the second panel extraordinarily well. We know that's where the Tor is because we're following the color. And then as the page continues, it lets him focus on the other characters and then cut back to the Tor for the setup for the last panel's punchline. And if this page was colored in any other way, it would be a mess. And if it had no color at all, it also would be confusing. And while we're on this page, I want to point out the character that's in this large panel here. Her outfit is red, but making it red in this panel would have pulled you into the foreground of this panel. Making it dark blue reduces that contrast, thus reducing the focus, which is interesting here because usually the largest element on any given page is the element that we are going to naturally focus on, but not here. Why? Because of the color. Because of the choice of that darker blue, it recedes into the foreground. And we see examples of color being used to define the focus on page after page. Like here on page 19, the color is fairly conventional. We see characters being the largest element and the focus of the color is corresponding accordingly. Whereas on other pages, we just let the story flow without overdoing it on the art or the color. It may seem like a small thing to point out when the color isn't actually doing anything special, but I think in action-based comics, it becomes really important. You have to know when to pull back and not be exciting so that when you are being exciting, it has more punch. And it all comes back around to knowing your story that you're trying to tell and using every tool available to make it clear and fun to read. And that's why I think this comic works so well and why I love it so much. Thanks for watching. This is part 2 of a new series that I'm working on about inspiration, where I find pieces of art that I like and I try to dissect and figure out why I like them. If you would like to read more of Chris's work, I've linked some of that down below so you can check that out down in the description. And if you like this sort of content and want to see more of it, you should hit the like button down below or let me know in the comments. And lastly, I'd like to thank everybody who supports me over on Patreon and everybody who clicks an Amazon link in any of the descriptions of these videos. It all helps out and it all supports this channel. It's all I've got for now. I'll see you guys in a couple of days.